Today we're going to create love handles for our partner. My name's Lazarus Redmayne, and this is TheDuchy.com. Start with one wrap around your partner's waist. I put the bite here in the front, run the rope around my partner's front to the back, and then run the tail through the bite. We do it in this order because the point of this is to be able to get some handles on the side of your partner to pull them backwards into yourself for some random unspecified reason. And we want the tensions to be pulling in that direction, keeping things nice and firm. Make sure that your hip band is positioned on your partner's body so it's on their hip bones, preferably in the saddle point area and not in the soft waist of their belly. Once you have the waistband the right size, reverse the tension and run the line under your partner's butt cheek. Reach between their legs and pull the line to the front. Once it's in the front, bring it back to your starting point, reach under your incoming line, hook the tail, and pull it through. Now, I have reversed my tension already, so it's grabbing that line and making sure that tension's on that line, so we're maintaining it, but I leave my tail up in this area where it's got a lot more freedom of movement. So now, I can maintain my tension and pull that through like that. Adjust the position of it so you have enough space to make a decent handle there. And now we're ready to lock that leg band off and create a set of handles. Now, I'm going to show you a couple different ways to do it. I'm going to do the simplest way first, which is simply wrapping around that line, and then I'll come back and I'll show you some alternative methods later on. So if we're going to do the simplest way, we reverse our tension, we go under that incoming line, we hook our tails like that. I tend to move my hand here to keep that knot in position while I'm hooking it through like this, so it stays in place, and then pull the tail through. Now, tighten that knot onto the center line, and then reach behind the center line and just grab the tail and pull it through. And begin wrapping around that line. When you're wrapping like this, it's likely to get deformed. That's okay, just slide it down and reform it as you need to. This side does tend to take a little bit of time because you're doing relatively long tail pulls. Now, once your handle's big enough that you can get a good grip on it, you can start to lock it off. And it is certainly possible that this may have moved during that time. So we need a way to hold that down. I am going to reposition that band a bit, and I'm going to get that bite closer to where my handle is. Now I want to lock this band in place, locking it to the handle before I run my tails to my partner's other side. So I'm going to take the lower, I'm going to split my tails like this. I'm going to take the lower one and move it to the other side and just kind of let this one hang there for a while I deal with the other side. Now on this side, I want to put a half hitch around that line before I lock this off. And because I want the ropes to be lying closest to my partner's skin, I'm going to do that half hitch in a certain way. I'm going to reach behind here, grab the tail, pull a little bit of that loop through, and then reach through that first loop I just created to grab the tail again and hold everything in place while I hook that line through like this. This way, I'm doing two tail pulls in one, and I'm getting things locked. All right. Now it's got the shape of the half hitch, and I'll just tighten it up like that. I'll do the same thing to the other side. First I'm going to fish it through the back, and then the front, and then pull it through like this. Once it's in place, I'm going to tighten it up like that. Now those half hitches are holding the bite from the belt in place and the tails are split. We can run them to our partner's other side. Now on your partner's other side, your lines are split. Bring them back together again, crossing one over top of the other. And you want to position that cross to be right about where you want that handle to be. Once you have that, then reach underneath the band, hook the one that's on top, and run it underneath the band and then back down like this. And you can adjust the position a little bit more like this. And then I like to put my fingers behind it and kind of adjust the tension of the band so I know that these bands and these bands here are all the same level of tension. Then I bring it, then bring the line back down so it joins the other. This is also an opportunity to adjust where these bands lie, making sure you have them where you want them to be. Well, now we have our bands together. We're going to do the same thing we did on the other side. Bring them back, run them snugly under our partner's butt, between the legs to the front, then reach under the incoming line, hook the tail, and pull it through like that. If it's gotten twisted, untwist it before you proceed. Again, when we're coming up this side, we're trying to make the handle. You can make a more decorative version that I'm going to show you. I'll come back and I'll show you that later in the tutorial. But to do the more simple version, you reverse your tension, you go under the incoming line, hook the tail, pull it through, and now you're ready to wrap up to make your second handle. So across that middle line, hook the tail, pull it through, and repeat. Now when you've gotten to the top, you want to lock this off. So it's already naturally coming this way. Just run it under the waistband here at the top, come straight up through. And then in X friction style, put it over top of the knot and bring it across the front as well and back to your starting point. Now the form of the tie is done. You could see where this might come in handy. I've got two good grips on the side, and this is what it looks like at the moment. Now, if you happen to only have a little bit of rope left over, you can simply tie it off with a couple of half hitches and you're done. But I happen to have quite a bit of rope left over. So let's just talk about a few options of how we might use up all this extra rope if this happens to be your case. Well, probably the simplest way is to repeat this same wrapping pattern, but just doing it across our partner's waistband in the back or the front, depending on what you prefer. So if you were going to do that, the rope's already kind of up here, you'd reach underneath, you'd hook it, and you'd begin to wrap around the belt until you ran out of rope. Because it's relatively simple, but here's some pictures on what that would look like. Now, while that version is relatively simple, it also takes quite a bit of time to do because you're doing tail pull after tail pull after tail pull. Here is a way to use up this rope and add a nice decorative flair. Still requires tail pulls, but it's a little faster. Instead of wrapping around this entire thing, lay the tail down, put your fingers above the tail and behind the belt, then feed the tail to those fingers and hook the tail and pull it through that little loop that you just made, like this. Again, notice how the tail is on the side of my loop where I've got a little more room to work and not on the inside where I'm pulling. So it makes it a little easier to move it through. So this has now given me kind of this little loop. Now I want to increase the decorative quality a little bit, so I'm going to give myself a little bit more room to work here. And I'm going to change the order of these lines so that they lay flat as they go around this curve. So they run parallel to each other. One goes a little bit longer around the outside like that. And then I'll lay my outgoing line on top of them, like this. Now I'm going to do that same pattern all the way across my partner's belt. So let's turn that a little more here so you can see it better. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to keep these lines parallel to each other instead of letting them fold over. So I put my fingers on top of my tail, underneath the belt, keeping the tails parallel to each other. I feed them to my fingers, pull them through like this. You can see how they're laying parallel to each other all the way around until they get to the belt part itself, and then I just fold them over top of the belt. Now the cool thing about this technique is that you can use this with variable amounts of rope left over. If you have a lot of rope left over, put these nodes closer together so you do more of them as you go across. If you only have a little bit of rope, keep them farther apart like this. I have a lot of rope left over, so I'm going to make these close together. So I'm just going to pull them closer together like this, making sure that those are still lying parallel as they go around that curve, just like this. So now I have two of these. You can see now why some might call this the bunting approach. It has this little decorative draping function. So now I'm going to keep doing this across the rest of my partner's back. So now we have that decorative bunting effect across our partner's back. You could have done this in the front just as easily as well. So I happen to have planned this, so I'm getting to the end of my rope right here when I'm getting to the other side. All I'm going to do now is, because I have knots in the end of my rope, it's relatively easy to just tuck this under a series of other strands, and it will hold just fine because there's not really any strength point there. It's just there to kind of hold things in place. All the strength of this has already been done in the bands and in the knots that we use to hold these bands in place. So for this particular ending, here is what it looks like from the back and from the front. Let's talk about one more way that you can end it that's way faster than this, but it does result in a slightly different look. So now we're back here at this ending point. We have a lot of rope to use up. We don't want to spend the amount of time to do a wrap around the back or to do the bunting ending on the end. We just want to get rid of this rope really quickly. Well, if you happen to have a chest harness, you could just go hook it up into there if you wanted to. You could also take this rope, run it up over your partner's shoulders in sort of a cross brace way. Or you could just run it around your partner's soft waist, coming back, and when you come back to the beginning, hook the tail through, reverse the tension again, and when you come back here, you'll have used up a lot of extra rope, and you just have a short amount of rope left, and that you can just weave into the back. I'm just kind of riffing right here. I'm just doing a little rosette kind of approach to ending off this rope. Running it underneath that center line. One end's a little longer than the other, no big deal. Just continue around and finish it off. So, like that. Now this waistband has not added any strength to the hip harness, but it looks nice and it was really fast to do compared to some of the other approaches. So it's another great option for you. For this one, this is what it would look like from the front. And from the back. Now let's go back and see what kind of decorative approaches we could use for these side bands. Instead of having a wrapped handle like this, you could have a more decorative band here in a number of ways, but one of them being with a cord square knot, and another being with a cord granny knot. So now we're going to do an alternative handle style where instead of just doing the wrap, I'm going to do a cord square knot with a core. Now if I was just going to do a wrap, I would reverse my tension here, I would reach under this incoming line and I would grab both of these lines, bring them up and then just start wrapping around. When I'm doing a cord square knot, I'm only going to grab the top one and bring the top one through like that first. Snug it up in there like this. The reason for that is that we want lines on both sides of that center line in order to create our core for our cord square knot. Now with a cord square knot, whichever line runs on top is going to be the one that runs on top every time. So whichever one, so this line, you can see it runs underneath there and then it runs on top of the center line. So this is going to be my cord 1. So I'm going to take cord 1, lay it across that center line, and I'm going to run my finger from inside this new loop I made to the opposite quadrant, like that. Now, cord 1 is still here. I'm going to reach down and grab cord 2, lay it across cord 1, and then put cord 2 around my finger like this, so I can hook it. And then I'm going to hold cord 1 while I hook cord 2 through like this. Just kind of pull it through. Like that. Now, back it up a little bit so you can see what's happening. So this looks like an overhand knot, but it's an overhand knot around that core. So now I can adjust things and I can tighten it down. So that's the first half of my cord square knot. Well, now I'm just going to continue the same way. I'm going to identify cord 1 and cord 2 every time based on which one is on top. So this one right here is coming in and it's on top of the center line. So I'm going to grab that one. That's going to be my cord 1. I lay it across the center line. I put my finger in the new hole, run it to the opposite quadrant. I'm holding line 1 in place while I reach down, grab line 2, lay it on top of line 1, hook that line 2, pull it through that hole like this, and then tighten it down. Now you can see that square knot shape on that core. Now we need to look and see which one of these lines is on top. This line here is the one that is on top of the center line. This is our new cord 1. Lay it across the middle, fingers to the opposite quadrant, grab cord 2 on top of cord 1, hook it with the finger, and pull it through. And tighten. Like this. We're going to repeat this approach all the way up until we have a good handle size, and it's going to result in a nicely decorative flat band on our partner's leg, which we can use as a handle. So now I'm just going to repeat that a bunch of times. So now you can see we've got this nicely decorative flat band laying against our partner's leg, and we're ready for the next stage. As shown in the original version where we just did the wrap, all we want to do before we continue on is do a nice half hitch around each side before we then bring our tails through. So under and under, hold things in place, pull the tail through, and then tighten it on there. Now this one can go to the front. Then same thing on the backhand side. Hook the tail, pull it through, and then through the other side. Tighten up. You have a good grip. Move them to your partner's other side, where you can continue on with this side. If we were going to do the wrap around, we would just run our fingers under here, hook the tail, bring it up, and then start wrapping around. But instead of doing that with both, I'm going to split the tails. I'm going to take the one on top, and I'll hook the one on top, and I'll pull that one through. But the one on the bottom, I'm going to leave here for now. Now let's talk about how to create a cord granny knot. So I'm going to call this line 1 and this one line 2. Line 1, I then lay across the top of the center line there, and I put my finger in that new hole that I created and bring it up to the opposite quadrant like that. Then, kind of holding line 1 up here, I'm going to reach down and grab line 2 and lay it across line 1 like that, and then hook it with my finger, and then hold line 1 in place while I draw line 2 through the hole that I just made like this. Then I gently tighten them up a little bit till I get the right shape so that now I have an overhand knot that's created around that center line. Now, I'll tighten that so I get a good grip. And now we're ready to do the cord granny knot. Now with the cord square knot, my line 1 was always the one that was laying on top of the center line. So this would have been my line 1. But with a cord granny knot, my line 1 is always on the same side. So I'm always going to start on this side of the center line. So my line 1 will always be over here. So take line 1, put it over there, put your fingers through and behind, reach down, grab line 2, hook line 2, pull it through the little hole, gentle adjust, and then firm adjust. Now you can't see it yet, but that is twisting a little bit and a little bit and a little bit more as we tie this, so it's going to create a twisted spiraling effect. Again, my line 1 is on this side of the center line. Take line 1, lay it over top of the center line. Grab line 2, lay it on top of line 1, hook behind. And tighten. Now, one of the challenges with doing the cord granny knot is that our orientation to the center line is rotating around it as we move forward. So now you can really see that this one It's 90 degrees to where we started, but I'm still doing the same thing. My center line is still here. I'm still using this same side as my starting point, as my line 1. It's going to look different to the camera now, though, because the orientation is different. So now I've got enough here to be a good grip. Now I'm going to let this rope kind of relax and be what it would normally want to be by letting it change its sides like this. And now you can really see that spiral. It looks like I can do 1 or 2 more. Once you get used to doing this tie, by the way, you can do it in reverse. So it won't be as confusing after a little practice. Don't worry about that. So I'm actually doing it in reverse. So I'm actually doing it kind of backwards. I'm pulling this line through first. And then this is my line 2. It's going behind things and up through that one instead. So I'm just reversing everything. That will come with practice. All right, so now I'm back up where I was. So now I'm back up at the top. Now we need to join these lines together before we do our ending, whatever that happens to be. This line is on top of this. It's sort of naturally already wanting to curl under. So I'm just going to let it curl under that center line. And now that both lines are on the other side, we'll just run it under the band like that, lock it in, and then decide what we're going to do with our ending like we discussed before. So this is the cord granny knot look.